Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and in this video we'll be doing a full breakdown on the Machinist job changes and additions coming in Endwalker. This information is fresh out of the latest media tour, but bear in mind, everything in this video is still subject to change before Endwalker's release. I also won't be focusing on potencies that much unless I think that it's worth bringing up. Oh, also, there's a playlist in the description and from clicking the I in the top right corner to check out all of my job change stuff for Endwalker. With that, let's get started. Machinist gameplay flow in Endwalker is going to be identical to its Shadowbringer's identity, just with a few upgrades. In terms of changes to the old skills, there's pretty much nothing different before level 80, minus some potency adjustments. When you log into the game early access day, it'll feel like you picked up right where you left off at first. The changes start after level 80, and they don't really change that much about the job, it's just a few simple things. At level 82, Spread Shot turns into Scatter Gun, which just deals a bit more damage, and it's a shotgun. At level 84, Reassemble gets a second charge. For the opener, that's going to mean an extra big hit, but otherwise the charge time is still the same as the previous cooldown, so you could still theoretically just use it once a minute. I'd imagine it might be better in some comps or at some points in the fight to use a Reassemble outside of just saving them both for a 2-minute big reopener. Perhaps keeping one for an ad that needs to be bursted, or maybe making use of them if the fight will be ending before you can actually save up for your 2-minute reopener, or maybe it'll be better with different buff alignments to do it at the 1-minute mark. The last one I'm not really sure about though, because most everything is going to be at a 60 or 1/22nd buff alignment regardless of comp. At level 86, your Automaton Queen will gain a bonus finisher called Crowned Collider. This attack occurs automatically after Pile Bunker is used, so this requires little to no involvement from the Machinists themselves. You'll only need to be mindful if your bot might not finish the Collider within something like a trick attack window, as there will be a slightly longer delay to consider, so maybe you manually activate the bot a little earlier. Finally, at level 90, you get Chainsaw. This is a global cooldown skill with a 1-minute cooldown that does big AoE damage, falling off after the first target though. It also generates 20 battery gauge. The big thing here is that with Chainsaw, you can now generate 50 battery gauge in your initial opener, allowing you to get a bot use right at the start of the fight. Other than that, you'll make sure that every time this comes off cooldown, you use it, just like you do with Drill and Air Anchor. Now, Chainsaw's potency is actually the same as Drill and Air Anchor on a single target, so its reassemble priority should be equal to them, which leaves us open for a few different options with an opener. As for AoE though, it does have some AoE, even with fall off damage, that's gonna make it a top priority for reassemble anytime you're going through a dungeon or even on bosses that have more than one target available. As for traits, there's really not too much more to add because most of the skills or changes we've mentioned already actually come from traits. Level 82, Spread Shot becomes Scatter Shot, 84, you get 2 charges of Reassemble, and at 86, you get Crown Collider for your bot. The only ones we didn't mention were at level 84, you get a little bit of a potency boost to your base 1-2-3 combo on Machinist, and at 88, Tactician has its cooldown reduced to 90 seconds, a change that's normal across the 3 ranged physical for each of their raid-wide mitigation tools. Now, for openers and for a general rotation on Machinist, it should be largely the same in Endwalker to what it was in Shadowbringers, just having to account for that extra chainsaw, the extra reassemble, and where your bot will be if you decide to use it in that first initial burst. If you look up a Machinist guide right now, you'll probably find one that has all sorts of variants on an opener, some of them allowing you to burst a little bit faster, some of them bursting a little bit slower, but what is considered a more standard buff timing overall, and then you have high ping variants of the openers as well, and I suspect that all of those things will pretty much be adjusted to make room for the few new things that Machinist has to use. Now, I think we're very likely to see Machinist openers vary quite a bit from fight to fight, and especially if you're someone with higher ping, there's definitely still going to need to be variations on that. So I'm not going to sit here and give you one be-all, end-all Machinist opener. I don't think this job works that way. Quite frankly, I don't think any job works that way as much as sometimes we'd like it to be. This was one of the openers that I came up with. It tries to apply as many principles to the Shadowbringers opener as possible while fitting in a chainsaw, fitting in the automaton, and fitting in an extra reassemble. I opted to not go with the pre-pull reassemble on this one, instead looking to do my first GCD as a heated split shot. This is so my drill can be the second GCD, which will make it so that exactly 20 seconds from there, I can do it after my hypercharge spam is over. So it's basically just trying to force a similar alignment to what we have in one of the more common openers with Machinist now, but just done by pushing drill back a GCD, thus pushing reassemble back one OGCD. Realistically, that shouldn't affect much. Reassemble should still line up with drill at every minute when it gets a charge, so that was my main reason for doing that. So after the drill, we have our ricochet, we have our barrel stabilizer. Outside of the moved reassemble, this isn't too different. The only difference is that we're really taking an extra GCD to start getting ricochet's charges moving, which shouldn't be too big of an impact in the long run. After that, we have a heated slug, where do a Gauss and a ricochet, a heated clean with just a Gauss, into the air anchor, and this one is where things get a little weird. I've gone back and forth in my head about this particular section a great many number of times. Now, the big thing here is that we have air anchor and chainsaw back to back. This will get us to 50 gauge with our bot after the heated clean, which lets us do an automaton. So I figured I could burn the reassemble here, or I could burn the reassemble on the drill later. I figured I would burn it here just because I have a little bit more space, and then I decided to wildfire before the chainsaw. This is because even with the chainsaw being the slower GCD, you'll still fit all 5 heat blasts into the hypercharge, unless of course your ping isn't great. I don't think this will work with any sort of high ping player. But we can get the reassemble done here, we get the wildfire started here, we get the chainsaw that lets us do the automaton and then go into a hypercharge. Now it'll take 3 heat blasts, in fact it'll take 4 heat blasts before we can properly overdrive to try and hit both Pile Bunker and Crown Collider inside of a Trick Attack and buffs. So I do Heat Blast Ricochet, Heat Blast Gauss, Heat Blast Ricochet, then Heat Blast Overdrive. And the reason I want to overdrive there specifically is because it is going to take a couple of extra seconds for Crowned Collider to actually hit. So I want to do it here instead of another GCD later. After that is the Heat Blast into the Ricochet. That's where the Wildfire will explode, so that'll be your 6 GCDs. And then you have Drill, and then you can dump the rest of your OGCDs and whatever buff timing you have remaining. Now, there are just some variations that I see on this that are totally possible. What if I want to make sure that I get my chainsaw and my air anchor a little bit earlier to get my automaton a little bit earlier? This automaton basically charges, maybe lands 1 arm punch, and then gets overdrived. Yeah, the potency on everything that you're overdriving for is a lot. It's like a lot. But I do wonder, I just haven't done all the math. I'm only doing what kind of logically makes sense based on what we do now. I could totally see doing a reassemble pre-pull, maybe even first GCD chainsaw. If a fight would end, let's say at like the 9-minute and like 15-second mark, then you probably wouldn't want to cut it so close with a chainsaw here. You'd probably want to chainsaw first GCD since it has a 1-minute cooldown. So I just already see a bunch of like little adjustments here or there to this opener, but it's flexible and it's workable, and I definitely want to see all the different variations that end up being optimal depending on the fight and the enrage time, especially with like week 1 savage raids and stuff like that. I'm sure we'll definitely see a few variations pop around for that. Another thing to remember, at least for the consistent DPS across the fight, is that your combos do last 30 seconds now, and Drill, Air Anchor, Chainsaw, all of your Heat Blasts, none of them interrupt your combo. So, as a Machinist, you've got a lot of room to squeeze these tools in whenever you need to, without fear of losing your combo. In Shadowbringers, I think it's if you do Drill, Air Anchor, and a Hypercharge, then unless you have some form of skill speed, you're pretty much guaranteed to lose your combo. At least I don't think I've ever kept my combo through that exact scenario. That won't happen anymore. So you can actually do like a skill dump and be okay cutting yourself off. So that's another thing to just remember. I don't think that's going to impact any of the openers, unless of course we end up foregoing automatons and just skipping the clean shot till later. But I mean, I only had like 2 weeks to work with this, so that's what I have so far. I'm sure the people who spend way more time, who put way more effort into this, and who have provided us with great information about Machinists and other jobs are going to take all the information they're getting and they're going to just pull it apart and do a really good job with it. So that's what I'm going to leave it at for now, but that's kind of my train of thought and where I ended up. But there's definitely other variations of the opener. I have them written down, but I'm just going to include the one. I gotta say, that's actually kind of right up my alley because I loved Shadowbringers Machinist and I still play it now. So I don't see this changing that. This is still going to be pretty much the same identity and flow, but with an extra GCD every minute. It's interesting that they basically just gave them one skill, another reassemble charge, and said good luck. I love this identity, but I wonder if we'll see them move away from pieces of it as we move forward. I think it might be about time to ditch Wild Charge or completely rework it, because in my opinion, Wildfire is outdated and not nearly the fun that it used to be. It's the least interesting part of Machinist to me at this point. So seeing a mechanic replace it or it reworked would really get my blood going a little bit and get me even more excited for a job that's new identity as something I already love. I also find it strange that they added no sort of high ping mitigation with the job's gameplay. I mean, they did it with a bunch of other jobs, but here, Hypercharge is still 8 seconds, Wildfire is still 10 seconds, and if you have any amount of ping that's like over 100 to 150, then those things are really uncomfortable. I expected them to make Hypercharge just give stacks of Heat Blast, or Wildfire has like a 30-second duration, but it automatically detonates after X number of hits. In an interview I did with Yoshi P for this media tour, I asked about that, and they said they haven't really received a lot of feedback about Machinist and its unping friendliness. I find that hard to believe, because I see it all the time as a topic of discussion, but hey, if you got issues, go provide feedback on the forums. Do it in a civilized and constructive manner, but do it, because as much as I have good ping, I don't think that's a good enough reason for me to just gloss over this. I'd rather do my part to encourage people to get these kind of changes into the game. With that, that's going to be a wrap for my overview on Machinist and my thoughts on it as well that came out of the most recent media tour. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share, and check out all the other Endwalker job change videos that I put out today. Anyway, thanks, and I'll see you in the next one. Until then, take care.